Succession Part 3. Since Amasya is further from Istanbul than Konya, Bayezid protested, delaying his departure from Kütahya until the end of October 1558, and then proceeding slowly with constant threats to turn back. At the same time, he taunted his brother with cowardice, and from his father demanded increased revenues for himself and his sons. When Suleiman, after promising, did not meet his demands, Bayezid's tone became even more strident. "You are the Sultan of the world. When you tell lies like this, which of your words can we believe in future?" Bayezid did not confine his defiance to words. On his journey to Amasya, by seeking money from his father, taxing towns and borrowing, he began to raise cash for an army and also to recruit troops from among discontented fief holders, tribesmen and peasants. Selim's tactic, which was probably a reflection of his character as much as a deliberate strategy, was the opposite of Bayezid's. He presented himself as an obedient son, submitting to every command of his father's. While forcing Bayezid to go to Amasya, Suleiman allowed Selim to proceed to Bursa and stay in the city until Bayezid had passed Ankara. Since Bursa was close to the capital, Selim's presence there would allow him to block Bayezid's route if, as he threatened to do, he should try to return and march on Istanbul. When Selim finally left for Konya, he asked his father for cannon from the ships at Izmir, as defense should his brother attack. Early in 1559, still receiving his brother's taunts, he reached Konya. By this time, it was clear that he was his father's favorite. When he had ordered the princes to Amasya and Konya, Suleiman had also sent the vizier Pertev Pasha to Bayezid and the vizier Sokollu Mehmed Pasha to Selim, evidently to ensure compliance with his orders. Pertev Pasha turned back after persuading Bayezid to continue to Amasya, while Sokollu Mehmed remained with Selim as his advisor throughout the crisis. He was later to marry Selim's daughter, Ismihan, and to occupy the post of Grand Vizier throughout his reign. In addition to Sokollu, the Sultan ordered the governors-general of Anatolia and Maras to join Selim with their forces and, when Selim requested that the governor-general of Karaman reinforce him with the cavalrymen in his province, for the removal of sedition and the protection of the honor of the Sultanate, Suleiman complied. He also ordered Selim to enroll troops from among the peasantry, since Bayezid had refused to disarm unless his brother did. Likewise, a battle was inevitable. By this time, Suleiman's support for Selim was public knowledge. In addition to the forces which he had already assigned, he mobilized the troops in Rumelia, eastern Anatolia and Syria, and dispatched Rustem Pasha to Afyan, to keep a watch on developments. Suleiman's open partisanship became more evident when he obtained a fatwa from the chief mufti, Abu Su'o, ruling that it was licit for the Sultan to fight against and kill the forces of his rebellious son. At the same time, the Mufti's own support for Selim is clear from a letter which he wrote to the prince during his struggle with Bayezid, saying that, as commanded, he was praying for a successful outcome. 26. The declaration that he was a rebel left Bayezid with no choice but to attack his brother before he had time to assemble his army. Selim, meanwhile, had received a command not to attack, but to remain at Konya to encounter Bayezid's forces. The two armies met at the end of May 1559. After a battle of 2 days, Selim's army was victorious. Bayezid, however, escaped with his life and fled to Amasya, once again seeking his father's forgiveness. This Suleiman would grant, only if he would execute those who had led him astray. Bayezid largely disregarded the order, beheading only 3 of his suite. In the meantime, in June 1559, Suleiman had sent Selim and Sokollu Mehmed at the head of an army towards Amasya, and ordered the governors on all his frontiers to intercept Bayezid if he attempted to flee, while he himself waited at Üsküdar, ready to mobilize against his son. In July, Bayezid fled from Amasya with his 5 sons, and an army of several thousand which increased as he fled eastwards, maintaining his men through forced loans and the levy of animals and provisions. Refusing to give battle to the pursuing governors-general of Diyarbakir, Karaman, and Erzurum, he continued his flight to Sadçukur on the border with Iran. Here he defeated a small force, which came in his pursuit, but this did not improve his chances of success against the armies of the 3 governors-general, Selim and Sokollu and, behind them, of Suleiman himself. In August, he crossed the border into Iran. In October, 1560, the Safavid Shah Tahmaspi gave him a magnificent reception in his capital, Kazvin. Suleiman, in the meantime, disposed his troops along the frontier from Erzurum to Baghdad, because it would be inappropriate for the army to disperse before definite news of Bayezid is known in Apas. He was now in the same situation as his grandfather, Bayezid II, had been, when Jem was a captive. of the French king, Charles VIII, Thomas B could, at any time, invade, with an Ottoman prince in his following. To avert the danger, Suleiman opened negotiations with the Shah, only in December, allowing Selim to return to Konya and the army to demobilize. In Qazvin, Bayezid's position had dramatically changed. When suspicions arose between him and Thomas B, the Shah, instead of treating him as an honored guest, imprisoned him with his 4 sons, and began to disperse his followers, meanwhile continuing to negotiate with Suleiman. By July 1561, Suleiman had offered 900,000 ducats from himself, 300,000 from Selim, and the fortress of Kars, against Bayezid's delivery to Selim. Thomas B, however, continued to delay until, in March 1562, his envoy reached Selim's court in Kütahya with the suggestion that Selim's good fortune depended on the execution of Bayezid and his sons, and that Thomas B would grant this in exchange for peace until the day of resurrection in Abbas. Selim and his father accepted the proposal and, in July 1562, their envoys reached Qazvin to take custody of Bayezid. When the Shah delivered the prince, Selim's man, Ali Aga, killed him, together with his 4 sons. The Sultan at the same time ordered the execution of his 5th son, an infant who was with his mother in Bursa. With this act, Selim remained as the sole claimant to the Ottoman throne. In return for his compliance, Thomas B gained a peace treaty, 500,000 ducats, and gifts for himself and his children. The execution of Bayezid and his sons initiated a change in the mode of succession. From the time probably of Osman I, it had been customary for all the sons of the Sultan to serve in governorships in Anatolia, and for each son to have an entitlement to the succession. From the time of Bayezid's death, only the eldest son served in the provinces, and it was the eldest who succeeded. The change, however, came about by chance rather than by policy. After 1562, Selim was Suleiman's sole surviving son, and succeeded to the throne unchallenged. At the time of his succession as Selim II, 1566-74, he had only 1 son, the future Murad III, 1574-95. His other sons he produced only after he had become sultan and, by the time of his death in 1574, none of these was yet old enough to serve as governor. Of Murad III's sons, 2, only the eldest, the future Mehmed III, 1595-1603, became a provincial governor. This, too, happened by chance. Apart from Mehmed, all his other sons had been born after 1581 and the oldest, at the time of his death, was only 11, and only on the verge of entitlement to a governorship. Nonetheless, precedent became practice, and, after Suleiman's time, seniority rather than fratricide after success in a civil war became the normal principle of succession. The practice of fratricide had never gained popular approval. The story of how Orhan's brother, Ali Pasha, voluntarily renounced rulership in favor of Orhan had come into being in the years 1422-3, at the time of the civil war at the beginning of the reign of Murad II. The tale does not reflect a real historical event, but rather the desire of contemporaries for a peaceful succession to the throne and an end to dynastic bloodletting. The redactor of the text even appended a moral to the tale. In those days Padishahs and lords took counsel with their brothers. They honored and respected each other. They did not kill each other. 27 When official chroniclers tried to justify the practice, they had recourse to hyperbole. Mehmed Pasha of Karaman, a chancellor and vizier to Mehmed II, added to his story of the execution of Bayezid I's brother, Yaqub, the comment, as will not be hidden to those of sound intelligence, there was the possibility of great evil in Yaqub's continuing to live. The Sultan dealt with him as was necessary, and necessity justifies what is forbidden. Similarly, in justifying Mehmed II's execution of his father's infant son by the daughter of Isfendiarulu, Kemal Pasha's aide in the early 16th century wrote, though he was still an immature child, action was taken by counsel of experienced elders. And it was seen to be the better course to root up the sapling of mischief, before it put forth leaves and branches. Most famous, however, is the clause in the so-called law book of Mehmed II, justifying fratricide. To whichever of my sons the sultanate shall be granted, by God, it is appropriate that he should kill his brothers for the good order of the world. Most of the ulama have declared this permissible. This clause is, in all probability, a 16th-century addition to the law book, 28 by either Selim I or Mehmed III, to justify their own manner of accession, and represents an attempt to combat popular revulsion at what had happened. Neither these literary flourishes nor the lavish distribution of gifts, after each fratricide, could reconcile popular opinion to the practice. A poem lamenting Prince Mustafa's death in 1553 and attacking his father was still in circulation in the 18th century, and in the words of another poet, Tashli Jali Yahya, d. 1575-6, the prince's error was not specified, his sin unknown, and the souls of men were made level with the dust. 29 a year after his death, an impostor claiming to be Mustafa could gain a following in his name. Prince Bayezid similarly left many mourners and adherents. In 1565, the authorities arrested a group of men in Bay's error for a public performance which reenacted his life.